I was sitting in that attorney's office in Boston, listening to my uncle's children tell the probate lawyer with absolute certainty. He has no right to the estate. He's not even real family. He's just the adopted kid my father took pity on 30 years ago. This inheritance belongs to us, the biological children. He doesn't deserve a single cent of what our father built. Victoria Sterling, my cousin, spoke like I wasn't even in the room. Like the 32 years I'd been part of this family meant nothing. They had a will in their hands, dated 2018, that left everything split between the three of them: Victoria, Charles, and Elizabeth. Zero for me. And everyone there seemed to believe it, because I was exactly what they said. The adopted son, the outsider who'd been brought into the Sterling family when I was 8 years old. I had no blood ties. I had no Sterling DNA. I had, according to them, no rights, and the will they presented seemed to prove that. My entire life as a Sterling, everything my adoptive father had meant to me, was about to end with nothing, no recognition, no dignity. Until something happened that nobody expected. My father's former business partner, Mr. Harold Chen, a 78-year-old man who'd been my father's closest friend for 40 years, walked into that office carrying a weathered leather briefcase and said in a voice that commanded attention, "I apologize for the interruption, but there is another will. The actual will of Jonathan Sterling, dated February 2024, just 3 months before his passing, and he gave me explicit instructions to present it only if his biological children attempted to exclude Thomas." And when that briefcase was opened, when my father's true, final wishes were read aloud, it didn't just completely change the distribution of the estate. It exposed a family lie so deep, a truth so profound, that even the attorney had to pause to process what was being revealed. What was in that will wasn't just about money. It was about truth, about what makes a family, about a man who finally found the courage to say what he'd kept hidden for over 3 decades. If you've ever felt like you didn't belong, like you weren't good enough, or like your worth was determined by biology rather than love, stay until the end of this story, because what happened in that Boston law office will show you that sometimes the family we choose is more powerful than the family we're born into. And subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell, because here I share the most powerful courtroom and estate reversals, real cases that will leave you speechless. Now let me tell you everything from the beginning, because you need to understand who I was to my father, who he was to me, and most importantly, who this family really was. My name is Thomas Sterling. I'm 40 years old, and I'm a high school English teacher in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I was born Thomas Carter in 1984, to a single mother who struggled with addiction. I don't remember much about my early childhood except instability, different apartments, sometimes going hungry, my mother's boyfriends coming and going. When I was 7, my mother died of an overdose. I was found alone in our apartment 3 days later by a neighbor. I went into the foster care system. I was a quiet, traumatized kid who didn't speak much, who flinched at loud noises, who didn't trust adults. I was placed in 3 different foster homes in 1 year. None of them worked out. I was labeled a difficult placement. Then, in 1992, when I was 8 years old, I was placed with Jonathan and Margaret Sterling. They lived in a beautiful Victorian house in Brookline, a wealthy suburb of Boston. Jonathan was 45, a successful corporate attorney. Margaret was 42, a philanthropist who sat on multiple charity boards. They already had 3 biological children: Victoria, 15, Charles, 13, and Elizabeth, 10. They were the perfect American family, and then there was me, the broken foster kid. I remember that first day so clearly. I arrived with a social worker, carrying all my possessions in a garbage bag. The Sterling children looked at me like I was an alien. Victoria whispered to Charles, but I heard her. "Why are they bringing him here?" Jonathan kneeled down to my level, looked me in the eyes, and said, "Thomas, we'd like you to stay with us for a while. Would that be okay?" I nodded, scared to speak. Margaret smiled warmly. "You must be hungry. I made cookies this afternoon. Would you like some?" It was the first time in months anyone had offered me food without conditions. The first few weeks were hard. I didn't fit in. Victoria and Charles mostly ignored me. Elizabeth was curious but cautious. I was terrified of doing something wrong and being sent away again. But Jonathan and Margaret were patient. Jonathan would sit with me every evening and read to me. I was behind in school, struggling with reading. He'd spend an hour with me, helping me sound out words, never getting frustrated. Margaret would tuck me in at night, something no one had done since I was very small. She'd say, "Good night, Thomas. We're glad you're here." And slowly, I started to believe maybe I could stay. After 6 months, Jonathan and Margaret asked me, "Thomas, how would you feel about staying here permanently? About us adopting you?" I didn't understand what adoption meant. They explained, "It means you'd be our son. Really, our son. Forever." I cried. I'd never had a forever before. In 1993, the adoption was finalized. I became Thomas Sterling. I was 9 years old. Jonathan told me, "You're my son now, Thomas. Just as much as Victoria, Charles, and Elizabeth. You're a Sterling." I believed him. I wanted to believe him so badly. But the biological children never fully accepted me. Victoria was the worst. She resented my presence. She'd say things like, "Just because they adopted you doesn't make you real family." Or, "You're so lucky they took pity on you. Don't forget that." Charles mostly ignored me, treated me like I was invisible. Elizabeth was kinder, but distant. We were never close siblings. But Jonathan and Margaret treated me as their son. They came to my school plays, helped me with homework, celebrated my birthdays. When I struggled in middle school with bullying about being adopted, Jonathan met with the principal, shut it down, told me, "Don't ever let anyone make you feel less than. You're my son. Period." In high school, things got better. I found my passion for literature, for teaching. Jonathan encouraged it. "Thomas, you have a gift for connecting with people through stories. You should pursue that." He paid for my college, same as he did for the others. I went to Boston University, got my degree in English education, graduated in 2006, got my first teaching job at a public school in Cambridge. I wasn't making sterling money, I was making teacher money. But I loved my work. Jonathan was proud. He'd introduce me to his friends. "This is my son Thomas, he's a teacher. Never adopted son. Just son." Margaret passed away in 2015 from breast cancer. It devastated all of us. At the funeral, I gave a eulogy. I talked about how she'd saved me, how she'd shown me what a mother's love looked like. Victoria rolled her eyes. Charles checked his phone. Elizabeth looked uncomfortable. But Jonathan squeezed my hand and whispered, "She loved you so much, Thomas. Never doubt that." After Margaret died, Jonathan and I grew even closer. He'd call me every Sunday. We'd have lunch once a week. He'd ask about my students, my life. I was married by then to my wife Rachel. We had 2 kids. Jonathan adored being grandfather to my children. He'd babysit, attend their school events, spoil them with gifts. Meanwhile, his biological children had their own lives. Victoria was a corporate lawyer like her father, married to another lawyer, 2 kids, living in Connecticut. She visited maybe once every 2 months. Charles was an investment banker in New York, rarely came to Boston except holidays. Elizabeth lived in California, married a tech entrepreneur, visited maybe twice a year. They were busy with their successful lives. I understood. But it meant Jonathan was often alone, so I was there. Not out of obligation, out of love. He was my dad. In 2020, during the pandemic, Jonathan was isolated. He was 73, high risk. His biological children would video call occasionally, but they were managing their own families, their own fears. I lived 20 minutes from him. I'd drop off groceries, stand in the yard, and talk to him through the window. Make sure he was okay. When vaccines came out, I visited in person again, carefully. We'd sit in his garden, talking about everything. He told me stories about building his law practice, about meeting Margaret, about his regrets. One day he said, "Thomas, you know what I regret most? That I let Victoria, Charles, and Elizabeth treat you as less than. I should have been firmer with them, made them accept you as their brother." I told him, "Dad, you gave me everything, a home, a family, a chance. That's more than enough." He shook his head. "No, Thomas, you deserve to be fully embraced, and I'm going to make sure in the end that you know your place in this family." I didn't understand what he meant at the time. In 2023, Jonathan's health started declining. Heart problems, mobility issues. He needed daily care. I arranged for a home health aide, but I also visited every other day after work. I'd cook dinner with him, watch old movies, just keep him company. Victoria, Charles, and Elizabeth would call, ask how he was doing, but visits were rare. Maybe once a month combined between the three of them. In January 2024, Jonathan called me to his study. He looked serious. "Thomas, I need to talk to you about my will." I felt uncomfortable. "Dad, you don't need to discuss that with me." He insisted. "Yes, I do. My current will from 2018 splits everything equally among Victoria, Charles, Elizabeth, and you, 25% each, but I've realized that's not right." My heart sank. Was he cutting me out? He continued. "It's not right because it doesn't reflect reality. Those three have had every advantage. Trust funds I set up, down payments for houses, business investments. You never asked for any of that. You worked your way through life on your own merit. And more importantly, you've been here. You've been my son in action, not just in name." He pulled out a document. "I'm changing my will. I'm leaving you 50%. The other three will split the remaining 50%. I was shocked. "Dad, no. That's going to cause problems. They'll resent me even more." He was firm. "Thomas, this is my decision. My money. My choice. You've earned it through your love and presence. They'll get plenty. They don't need to like it. They just need to accept it." I tried to argue, but he'd made up his mind. He went to his attorney, updated the will. I wasn't present for that. I didn't want to be. It felt uncomfortable, even though I understood his reasoning. Jonathan passed away on May 10th, 2024. Peacefully, in his sleep, at home. I was the one who found him when I came for our regular dinner. He was 77. I was devastated. I'd lost the only real father I'd ever known. The funeral was large. Jonathan had been well respected in legal circles. Hundreds of people came. Victoria, Charles, and Elizabeth gave eulogies about their father, about what a great man he was, how much they'd miss him. I also spoke. I talked about the man who saw past a broken 8-year-old boy, who gave him a family, who taught him what unconditional love looked like. I cried through the whole thing. After the funeral, Victoria approached me. "Thomas, thank you for being there for Dad these last years. We appreciate it." It was the nicest thing she'd said to me in years, but it felt hollow, obligatory. 2 weeks later, I received notice from the estate attorney, Preston and Associates. Reading of the will. I arrived at the downtown Boston office, nervous. It was a formal conference room, mahogany table, leather chairs. The attorney, Mr. Gerald Preston, a man in his 60s with silver hair, presided. Victoria was there with her husband. Charles was there. Elizabeth flew in from California. And there was Harold Chen, my father's old business partner and best friend, a man I'd known my whole adopted life as Uncle Harold. Mr. Preston began, "We're here for the reading of Jonathan Sterling's will and testament. I have the will that was filed with this office in 2018. He opened a document. "According to this will, Mr. Sterling's estate, valued at approximately $12 million, is to be distributed as follows: 25% to Victoria Sterling Walsh, 25% to Charles Sterling, 25% to Elizabeth Sterling Huang, and 25% to Thomas Sterling." The biological children nodded. It was what they expected. $3 million each, substantial but equal. But then Mr. Preston frowned. "However, I received a call from Mr. Harold Chen yesterday indicating there may be a more recent will." Victoria sat up. "What? There's no other will. That's the will Dad filed with you in 2018. That's the valid one." Harold cleared his throat. "Actually, Victoria, your father updated his will in February 2024. He used a different attorney to do it, someone outside his usual circles. He wanted it kept confidential until his death." Charles looked annoyed. "Why would he do that? Why wouldn't he use Mr. Preston?" Harold responded. Because he knew if he used his regular attorney, word might get back to you, and he wanted to make his final decisions without interference. Elizabeth spoke up. Well, even if there is another will, I'm sure it doesn't change much. Dad was fair. He'd split things among his 4 children equally. Harold looked at her. Elizabeth, your father did not consider things equal. Thomas was not given the same financial advantages you 3 received over the years. Your father wanted to rectify that. Victoria's face hardened. Harold, with all due respect, Thomas was adopted. We're the biological children. We have the primary claim to the estate. And that's when she said it, looking right at me. He has no right to the estate. He's not even real family. He's just the adopted kid my father took pity on 30 years ago. This inheritance belongs to us, the biological children. He doesn't deserve a single cent of what our father built. Charles nodded in agreement. Adoption is one thing, but blood is blood. The estate should go to Dad's real children. Harold's face went red with anger. How dare you? Jonathan loved Thomas as much as, if not more than any of you, and he made that explicitly clear in his final will. He opened his briefcase, pulled out a sealed envelope. This is the will Jonathan Sterling executed on February 15, 2024, with attorney Sarah Morrison as witness, properly notarized, completely legal. He gave it to me for safekeeping with explicit instructions. If his biological children attempted to diminish Thomas's place in the family or the estate, I was to present this immediately. Mr. Preston examined the envelope, verified the seals and notarization. This appears to be in order. I'll need to review it, but if it's properly executed and dated after the 2018 will, it supersedes the earlier document. He opened the envelope carefully, pulled out several pages, and began reading silently. His expression changed multiple times. Surprise, confusion, then something like sadness. After several minutes, he looked up. This is highly unusual, but it appears to be legally valid. He looked at all of us. I'm going to read this aloud now. The room fell silent. Mr. Preston began. I, Jonathan Michael Sterling, being of sound mind and body, declare this my last will and testament, revoking all previous wills. First, I want to address the distribution of my estate and the reasons for my decisions. He paused, read ahead silently, and his eyebrows raised. He continued reading aloud. To my biological children, Victoria, Charles, and Elizabeth, I leave the following. To each of you, I leave $500,000, my love, and my disappointment. The disappointment is not in who you are, but in how you chose to treat your brother Thomas. From the moment I brought him into our home, you saw him as less than an outsider, a charity case. Despite my repeated insistence that he was your equal, your brother in every way that mattered, you never accepted him. Victoria gasped. Charles looked furious. Elizabeth went pale. Mr. Preston continued. I acknowledge my own failure here. I should have demanded better from you. I should have corrected this dynamic more forcefully. But I was too permissive, too hopeful that time would change your hearts. It didn't. So now, in death, I make my position unambiguously clear. Thomas Sterling is my son. Completely, fully, without qualification. The attorney paused, then continued. To my son, Thomas Carter Sterling, I leave the remainder of my estate, approximately $10 million, the house in Brookline, my personal effects, and something more important than money, the truth. I was in shock. 10 million? The house? What truth? Mr. Preston's voice became somber as he read the next section. Thomas, there is something I never told you. Something I should have told you years ago. But I was afraid. Afraid of how it would change things. Afraid of causing you pain. Afraid of my own past. The truth is this. You are not just my adopted son. You are my biological son. The room erupted. Victoria shouted, That's impossible. Charles, this is insane. Elizabeth just stared. I couldn't breathe. What? Mr. Preston raised his hand for silence and continued reading. In 1983, before I married Margaret, I had a brief relationship with a young woman named Jennifer Carter. She was a waitress I met during a business trip. We spent a weekend together. I never saw her again. I didn't know she was pregnant. I didn't know about you, Thomas, until you entered the foster system. When your case came across my wife Margaret's desk, she was volunteering with a foster care placement agency. She recognized your mother's name from old letters she'd found years earlier. She confronted me. I admitted the affair. She was devastated, but she was also compassionate. She said, "That child is suffering. He's your son. We have to help him." I was crying. This couldn't be real. The attorney continued. Margaret suggested we foster you, then adopt you, without telling you the truth. She feared it would complicate things, make you feel different from our other children. I agreed, thinking it was best. But it was a lie I've lived with for 32 years. Thomas, I didn't just choose to adopt you out of charity. I adopted you because you were mine, my blood son. I took a DNA test when you were 9, just to be absolutely certain. 99.9% match. You are my biological child as much as Victoria, Charles, and Elizabeth. The room was spinning. Harold was crying. Mr. Preston continued reading. I know this revelation comes late. Unforgivably late. But I want you to understand. Every moment I spent with you was precious to me. You were never just the adopted son. You were my boy. My son who I watched grow from a traumatized child into an extraordinary man. A teacher who shapes young lives. A father to your own children. A man with more integrity in his little finger than most people have in their whole body. He paused. I'm leaving you the majority of the estate not just because of our biological connection, but because you were the child who showed up. Who loved me without condition. Who never asked for anything. You earned this through your character. Through your heart. The document continued with legal specifics about asset distribution. But I wasn't listening anymore. I was trying to process. Jonathan Sterling was my biological father? My whole life, I thought my father had been some unknown man who'd abandoned my mother. But it was Jonathan. He'd known. He'd found me. He'd brought me home. Victoria broke the silence. This is a fabrication. A lie to cheat us out of our inheritance. Harold stood up, furious. How dare you? Jonathan was many things, but he was not a liar. And I can prove it. He showed me the DNA test years ago. He confided in me when Thomas was 12. I've kept his secret all these years because he asked me to. But I will not stand here and let you call him a liar. Charles tried a different approach. Even if it's true, it doesn't change the validity of the 2018 will. He can't just change his mind and cut us out. Mr. Preston intervened. Actually, this 2024 will is properly executed, more recent, and therefore supersedes the 2018 will. It's legally binding. Additionally, Mr. Sterling included extensive documentation. He pulled out more papers from the envelope, including a copy of the DNA test from 1993, copies of correspondence with the foster care system, and a letter from Margaret Sterling, written before her death, confirming the truth of Jonathan's relationship with Thomas's biological mother and their decision to adopt him. He read from Margaret's letter. If you're reading this, it means Jonathan has finally found the courage to tell Thomas the truth. Thomas, dear boy, I want you to know that bringing you into our home was never charity. You were Jonathan's son, and therefore you became mine. I loved you from the moment you arrived. I'm sorry we didn't tell you sooner. I hope you can understand and forgive us. You deserved better than secrets. Love, Mom. I lost it completely. Margaret had known. She'd loved me anyway. She'd called herself my mom. Through my tears, I heard Victoria. I don't accept this. We're contesting this will. This is undue influence, manipulation. Harold cut her off. Contest all you want. You'll lose. Jonathan anticipated this. He had 3 separate psychiatric evaluations in the months before he died, all certifying his complete mental competence. He has video testimony explaining his decisions. He covered every legal base because he knew you'd react exactly this way. Elizabeth, who'd been quiet, suddenly spoke. Is it true? Was Thomas always our biological brother? Harold nodded. Yes. You grew up with your brother and treated him like garbage because he wasn't real family. But he was always family. More family than you were willing to be to him. Charles stood up. Come on, Victoria, Elizabeth. Let's go. We'll let the lawyers handle this. Victoria turned to me before leaving. You won. Congratulations. You manipulated our father for 30 years and got your payout. Her words stung, but Harold responded before I could. Thomas didn't manipulate anyone. He didn't even know. Jonathan manipulated the situation, yes, but out of love for his son. The son he'd found and saved. The son who actually loved him back. They left. It was just me, Harold, and Mr. Preston. The attorney looked at me with sympathy. Mr. Sterling, I know this is overwhelming. We'll need to process probate, but the will is clear and valid. You're the primary beneficiary. I couldn't even respond. Harold sat next to me. Thomas, your father wanted you to know the truth. He wanted you to understand that you were never less than. You were always his son, biologically and in every other way. I finally found my voice. Why didn't he tell me when he was alive? Why wait until he was gone? Harold sighed. Fear. Shame about how things happened with your mother. Worry that it would change your relationship. He was wrong to wait, but his love for you was never in question. The legal battle lasted 4 months. Victoria, Charles, and Elizabeth hired expensive attorneys. They challenged everything. Jonathan's mental competence, the validity of the DNA test, whether the will was executed properly, allegations that I'd manipulated him. But Harold had been thorough. Every allegation was countered with documentation, video testimony from Jonathan explaining his decisions, witness statements from his doctors, friends, and colleagues. The psychiatric evaluations were irrefutable. Jonathan had been completely sound when he made the will. In September 2024, the judge ruled, the 2024 will is valid. It supersedes all previous wills. The estate will be distributed as Jonathan Sterling directed. I inherited $10 million, the house, and the truth about my origins. Victoria, Charles, and Elizabeth each received their $500,000 and their father's disappointment. They didn't speak to me after the ruling. No goodbye, no reconciliation. Just silence. But Harold became even closer to me. He told me stories about my father, about conversations they'd had about me over the years. Thomas, he was so proud of you. Every parent-teacher conference he attended, every school play, every milestone, he'd call me and tell me about it. You were his joy. I found my father's personal journals in the house. Years of entries, many about me. One from 1993, right after the adoption. Thomas is home, really home now. He's mine legally, biologically, and most importantly, in my heart. I watch him sleep at night, still afraid someone will take him away. But no one will. He's a Sterling, he's my son. I just wish I could tell him the truth. But Margaret is right, it's too complicated. Maybe when he's older. Another from 2006, my college graduation. Thomas graduated today. Honors in English education. I've never been prouder. Victoria made law review. Charles made his first million. Elizabeth launched her startup. But Thomas chose teaching. Chose helping kids like he once was. That takes a special kind of courage. I wish I had his character. And one from 2024, just weeks before he died. I finally did it. I changed the will. I told the truth in writing if not in person. Thomas will know. When I'm gone, he'll know he was loved. He was wanted. He was mine. I hope he can forgive me for waiting so long. I hope he understands that every day with him was a gift I never deserved, but treasured completely. Reading those words, I understood. He'd loved me. Completely. He'd just been too afraid to say the whole truth while he lived. But he'd shown it. Every day for 32 years, he'd shown it. I donated $2 million to foster care organizations and programs supporting adopted children. I set up a scholarship fund at Boston University for foster kids pursuing education degrees, called the Jonathan and Margaret Sterling Scholarship. I kept the house in Brookline, the house where I'd first felt safe, first felt loved. Rachel and I moved in with our kids. We turned one of the rooms into a reading room, filled with my father's books, where I tutor struggling students for free twice a week. The biological children eventually came around, in a way. Elizabeth sent an email a year later. Thomas, I've had time to think. Dad was right. We treated you terribly. I'm sorry. I can't undo the past, but I want you to know I recognize how wrong we were. You were always our brother. We just refused to see it. I appreciated that. Charles sent a card, more formal but still an acknowledgement. Victoria never reached out. I don't know if she ever will, but I've made peace with it. I learned that family is complicated, that biology matters to some people more than love, but it doesn't matter to me. Jonathan Sterling was my father in every way that counted. He found me when I was lost. He loved me when I was unlovable. He gave me a life, an education, a chance. And in the end, he gave me the truth. The truth that I was never the charity case. I was never the outsider. I was always his son. From the very beginning, I was his son. If you made it to the end of this story, I need to tell you something. Your worth is not determined by your DNA. It's determined by your character, your actions, your love. I was my father's son long before I knew we shared blood. And that's what mattered. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And leave in the comments. Have you found family where you didn't expect? Let's build a community of love here. Stay strong, and see you in the next video.